Stan has had a above top secret clearance. He's worked undercover with the FBI. He's worked on black projects.
There's been evidence of superhuman involvement in our development, human race development for, maybe even 15, 16,000 years. We're not sure exactly when to put a date on it. The ones that are here now, the fallen ones, I call them the fallen ones because they were in a parallel universe to us where the Bible calls heaven. And there were gateways to this, which the Sumerians knew about, and they made ziggurats to try to entertain the gods when they came from the parallel universe.
Many millennia ago, at the peak of Mount Hermon in the Golan Heights, a group of divine beings known as the Watchers, or Sons of God, descended in an act of rebellion against their king, Yahweh. By teaching them the secret knowledge of the cosmos, they sought to wrestle dominion of the earth away from humanity. They bore children with them, and their offspring were both human and divine. These giants are the demigods of old, and the events that transpired would forever alter the course of human history. At Camp Hermon, we discuss the oddities of the ancient world and their lingering impact on our world today. Welcome.
Hey campers, welcome back to another episode of Camp Hermon. I'm flying solo tonight. Tori was not able to make it. Our boy Mikey Stibbs was going to come on tonight to join us in this conversation with Stan Deyo. Mike also wasn't able to make it. And when I was setting up for this conversation with Stan, my mic just randomly stopped working. So if the sound quality sounds a little bit different than what you're used to, it's because I'm rocking my Apple headphones here. So hopefully it doesn't sound too bad. I heard Stan Deyo. And Stan, is it Deyo? Am I pronouncing that last name right? Okay.
The Banana Boat song, Deyo, daylight come. That's the one.
Love it. So I heard Stan Deyo on the Weird Christian podcast, must have been 2 or 3 years ago, and talk about a guy with just a fascinating story in history. And I'm just going to give a little bit of his bio, and then I'm going to let him kind of jump in and introduce himself. So Stan has had a above top secret clearance. He's worked undercover with the FBI. He's worked on black projects headed up by Dr. Edward Teller. Went to the Air Force Academy for a time, computer programmer. The guy's been all over the world. And from what I've heard in previous podcasts, he's got this fascinating stories. So Stan, I really appreciate you joining me tonight.
Glad to be here, Chris, and to talk to your listeners. That'd be good. I guess if we're going to talk about a few things tonight, maybe my involvement with the flying saucer UFO arena of strange events. In 1971, I was recruited in Dallas to go to Australia to work for Dr. Teller and to develop a special kind of flying saucer. And they had already started anti-gravity before I got there, and I was looking at a plasma drive version of it. But so I was recruited down there, and I left the program after the project after 2 years because we got closed down. I don't know why, but they started, shredding records and sending my records out. They said, "Here, get rid of your own records, keep what you want." There was just a day that happened, and we didn't know why until later. But I did find out that apparently we'd been hosting, I guess you call them aliens. They're people from a parallel dimension, fallen ones. And we'd been hosting them in various under ocean bases, supplying them technology and equipment to do what they needed to do there. And in the late 70s, they had completely kicked us out. We had running shooting battles with them in various locations, South Pole and in Australia, and here in Arizona, I think it was, or New Mexico. New Mexico it was. Anyway, um, they were getting rid of the humans out of their facility, so our records were being destroyed, so they couldn't track us down to prevent us from telling people, civilians, what was going on later. And it caused me, when that happened, I had to run and change my name and go underground in Australia for a few years. And I outran all but one intelligence agency that was sent to either kill me or interrogate me. And only one of them called me there in the Nullarbor Desert, but that's another story. I made it over across the country, across Australia, over to Perth. And there, I guess in 1977, I started to reveal what I'd done with this project. And it was a TV show on Channel 9. And they were doing a documentary, UFOs Are Here. Guy Baskin, a British producer, was doing it, in charge of it. And they had found out about my involvement through an accidental release of the information that I made. But anyway, I was invited to be on the show. And it was the highest rating show that they'd had on the channel ever. And as a result, a book publisher over in Melbourne, the other side of the country, said, "Let me have you write a book, and we'll edit it and sell it for you." I said, "Well, okay. Here's the data," and I gave them a whole bunch of folders and stuff. And their ghostwriter over there looked at it, the first one, and he said, "Oh, this is too hard." And they sent it back. And so I said, "All right, well, can't you get another ghostwriter?" "Yeah, we'll try." And so he threw it back too, said, "Too hard." So now, I looked at the contract that we'd had between us, the publisher and I went over. I said, "Look, guys, you're not making any headway. I'll write it myself and I'll publish it myself. Just sign me out of the contract," which I did. And they did. So I went back home to Perth. And by 1978, around the middle of the year, I think it was, I had written The Cosmic Conspiracy. And it sold very well in 21 countries and whatever, and in French and German and English. And it just went like wildfire. And I talked in there about the UFO cover-up, a little bit of it, and the secret societies behind it all. And things that I would not know until later, that copies of that book got into the hands of President Clinton's Secretary of Defense, Jim Schlesinger, into the Defense Department, into King Charles, and to his father, the Duke of Edinburgh. There were several world leaders that had copies of it in their personal library because of what I'd put into it. And Jim Schlesinger, on Clinton's cabinet, he came down to Australia with Clinton for something in 1998, I think it was. Anyway, 1996, 97, somewhere in there. Anyway, he contacted me through a civilian, Jim Schlesinger did, and had her tell me that they had a copy of the book and that it told their blueprint for the control of the planet, that my whole scenario that I put forward in The Cosmic Conspiracy was their scenario. And that I was the expert that people needed to read or to talk to if they wanted to know about what was really happening. And he stayed my silent mentor for several decades. In fact, it was him that restored my U.S. passport and citizenship, which had been taken away because they didn't want me to come back here and have access to the media that I would need to expose this thing. But they released that in 2001 and let me come home. It was his doing. Anyway, UFOs it's a very involved topic. And as you know from looking at various TV shows like Ancient Aliens and that kind of stuff, that there's been evidence of superhuman involvement in our development, the human race development for, maybe even 15, 16,000 years. We're not sure exactly when to put a date on it. But they, the ones that are here now, the fallen ones, I call them the fallen ones because they were in a parallel universe to us where the Bible calls heaven. And there were gateways to this, which the Sumerians knew about, and they made ziggurats to try to entertain the gods when they came from the parallel universe and poured it in. And these ziggurats were like, step pyramids. And up at the very top, I found one blueprint for that was in the Marduk Stela. And it showed the place where they would come through. And they put food out for them and drink on the top level to let the quote unquote gods stay there for about an hour and then come down to the next level and stay there for about an hour and then come down to the runway or the walkway, come down into the level of, the dirt with the people. The reason they did this was because these gods glowed when they came, and their atoms were much more energetic than ours, and they had to dissipate this energy so that they could touch humans without hurting them. I guess kind of like the Ark of the Covenant type hurt, they would have zapped somebody. In fact, if you remember the Bible story about Jesus in the garden with Mary when she saw him walking around after he had risen from the dead, she wasn't sure it was him. And then suddenly she looked and she realized, oh, that's you, Messiah. And so she runs toward him and he says, stop, don't touch me, for I have not yet ascended. Now, the ascension process does charge them up with energy, and then they're dangerous. They don't want to touch you. And it would have hurt her. So he was going to go up, which he did, came back down and stayed with the disciples for about 40 days before he finally left at, strangely enough, Mount Hermon. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, absolutely. The show is called Camp Hermon.
I wondered about that. Well, that's where the original 200 in the Book of the Jubilees, where the original 200 fallen ones, angels, came down to earth. They descended there at Mount Hermon, which is above Damascus over in Syria. Anyway, the thing is that there's evidence in the ancient alien documentaries that show that super beings came from a parallel universe, gated in. And even in the Bible, in the tale of Ezekiel, seeing the flaming chariot come down. Well, he looked up in the sky, and here was this flaming, hot chariot coming down and descending, and then eventually, coming past him. I don't know whether it floated or whether it went on the ground or not, but it had to be discharged of the energy so that he could touch it if he needed to. All these things indicate that the method of accessing the parallel universe requires a portal and a safe way to dissipate the energy when they're coming our way. And going their way, of course, we'd have to be, ramped up, have energy put into our atoms. It's an interesting thing, if I kind of bounce around here, forgive me, but it's triggered a thought. In the Bible, it says, a day with the Lord God is like 1,000 years here. So you think, oh, yeah, okay, he lives forever, like, big deal. Wait a minute. Is it saying that his 24-hour day or whatever it is, his day, while he's having his day, 1,000 years pass by here on Earth? There's a time differential. And how could that be? And well, in physics, we start to look at the energy density of space in the parallel universe versus here and versus down below us in the Tahom depth of the Earth. The energy difference in these layers upon layers of existence is what affects the passage of time. So, and this fits in with how we operate, electrogravity flying saucers. There have been a number of cases that have been reported where people came upon a landed flying saucer, whether it was in trouble or whatever, it was landed. I think a Brazilian army sergeant was one report. He and his men saw the light come down the field at the end of the airport there, so they went out to find out what the light was, split up into groups to search for it. Everybody but him came back to the meeting point. It's nighttime, and they said, "Well, where's the sergeant?" And he was gone for 15 minutes. Then all of a sudden, he comes stumbling out of the brush with suddenly a 5-day growth of beard. And, he was bumbling and whatever, but he'd apparently stumbled upon a craft that they were looking for, had started to walk toward it, and was the difference in the passage of time was different for him. He started to accelerate. His atoms started to get that new energy, and they started to operate faster, I guess is the best way to say it, to vibrate faster. And so he was experiencing time at an accelerated rate in that field. Now, whether he got into the craft or not, they didn't know, but that explains how 5 days could pass for him when only 15 minutes had passed out here. So there's differentials in time. Now, it was the reverse of what would happen, with God. It tells us what kind of a craft that was. It was like an energy sucker, if you wish. It was taking energy out from our environment. And it was not going up to a higher energy density up there, but a lower to ours, relatively speaking. So in there, once he got into it, he was acting like God's timing, accelerated. But out here, we were like God looking down there. Everything was, 15 minutes, and then 5 days had passed for him. Anyway, it's a confusing thing of physics, but it's an interesting point about the parallel universes and parallel dimensions, which take us to heaven and whatever.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating, and I've heard it talked about in this, and I don't think this is not theoretical, but like if you had a clock at sea level, two clocks, and they were same time, and you took one up on the top of like a really tall mountain, it's going to read differently than the clock at sea level. Does that have anything to do with kind of what you're talking about as far as like physics and time?
It's part of Einstein's model for relativity that the passage of time depends upon your relative velocity to the rest of the universe. It's not just your relative velocity as an object, but as the vibrational rate of all your atoms. You take it down to that level, and then what we call time it doesn't have any units. It's a ratio, because we measure, let's say one stroke of a grandfather clock, your arm goes click, click. It passes that distance, click, click, and in that time, or in that passage of the arm of the clock, maybe 3 or 4 seconds on your watch have passed, which is a little click of a little hand, or a cesium atom vibrating. So it's all distances that have been traversed by expanding or contracting, say, cesium atoms or other devices to measure time. It's all relative to a distance traveled here versus the distance traveled there. You compare if you divide the two out, it's just a pure ratio. There's no real units. We put unit values on them, but they are relative ratios. So that's one of the things that was difficult. But time passes differently here on Earth on the surface than it does down deep inside the planet. And these things can all be related to Einstein's general relativity and the energy density of space.
Wow. So you touched on a lot. So I'd like to ask you some questions that I'm having that I'm pretty sure people listening, if they're not too familiar with what you've talked about, probably have too. So within these crafts, because you talked about you working on flying saucer projects, are you saying, do we have humans and non-human entities flying around in these crafts?
Oh, yes, most definitely.
Okay. And this technology, the anti-gravity technology, I'd love for you to explain how that works. And did we get this technology from the fallen ones, like interacting with them through psychedelics, interacting with them physically on the earth or in the earth? You talked about them being in underground bases. Where did we get this tech or this information to be able to develop it?
Well, not being present at the moment that anti-gravity was discovered, my research showed that in 1958 that various projects that would be filed in the Library of Congress under electrostatics or electromagnetics and things like that, that electromagnetism papers and patents expanded from 1958 onward like this, where, really great numbers of them. Whereas electrogravitics, electrostatics, the papers published in that became a very narrow window, almost non-existent. The information was being discovered by various corporations. In 1958, in the Cosmic Conspiracy, I have a reprint in the appendix of this article in the New York Herald Tribune. There were a number of companies like Northrop Grumman and Martin Marietta. There were just a number of companies that were involved in trying to find how you can make anti-gravity. Now, why? Because they had heard of the Foo Fighters and various other things. We knew something had to be available, and that we had to revise the model that we had of the universe and how everything worked to a hydrodynamic model, a fluid model for space. So how did they do it? Well, if you look up a book on the internet, it's a short story called Noise Level. And it's back in the late 50s, early 60s. And it tells about a fictional thing where the corporations of the United States got together and how they convinced the scientists to get rid of the noise level, saying we can't have anti-gravity, it doesn't exist. Get rid of it and convince them it's already been done with a theatrical performance, which you can read about in the story, noise level. Anyway, in the process of what they were doing, they discovered that by using toroidal coils, like one coil being around like a donut, a hollow iron donut with a cut in it, a slice at one point, and another coil being up inside that, going around, but at right angles to the original coil, that by doing those and pulsing direct current through them, they could generate electric field that went out several hundred feet from that craft. It would take a few minutes to stoke the field up, to stack it like an onion layer, but they did it. Now, I know that this was being discovered by various people, independent of large corporations. A guy that used to work for me in Dallas before I left to go to Australia was a former captain of a Strategic Air Command bomber. And his navigator came to him one day and he says, Colonel, he says, I'm going to give you this envelope. I'm sealed it. And I want you to keep this. I've signed it. He says, if anything happens to me, I want you to make this public. I want it patented. Well, he didn't open the envelope, but he asked the guy, he said, well, what's in the envelope? He says, well, I'm going to tell you the darndest thing you're ever going to hear, Colonel. He says, I was at home experimenting with electricity and magnetism, trying to make, something float. He said, I built this circuit, and I had the wires going through a knife blade connector over to a device that kind of looked like a birthday cake with candles. It had 3 layers. It had about 3-inch long soft copper rods with a split washer around that copper rod. There was a coil around the copper rod, and then there was a coil around the washer, and these were all connected. And then he said, I applied the current to it to see if it would float, because I figured it would interact with the Earth's gravitational and magnetic field. He said, well, nothing happened for a while, George. He says, I was sitting there, and then all of a sudden I thought I saw the thing start to wobble a bit, and it came up off the table, and it started to rise up. And as it did, I could see underneath it that the air was not looking, perfectly transparent. It was kind of wobbly a bit. And he said, well, I'll take this wooden broom and just pass it underneath there and see if I can feel anything. And of course he could. He felt like heavy jello, as he said, pushing it underneath the thing that was rising up on the table. And it was still rising while he was doing all this. And it kept on rising up, up, up. And he thought, I better turn that off. So he took that wooden broom handle and went over to hit the knife blade switch to disconnect the driver's circuit like that. And as he opened it up, this dirty big arc climbed out in the air between the circuit and where he was disconnecting and connected in the air. He couldn't turn it off. So now he was panic stricken. So he thought, well, I better stop this. I'll take this broom handle. I'll swing really hard and try to break that field, which he swung and he hit underneath that thing. And sure enough, the experimental model dropped to the floor. The lights in the house went out. Circuits stopped. In fact, the lights on the block went out. It had
Oh,
sent
wow.
that stored energy back up through the power pole behind his house and blew the transformer, which he explained as, gosh, I don't know what happened to the electricity people next day that came out to repair the damage. But anyway, that was that was back in the late 50s, Strategic Air Command, an individual filing this patent. So even if the corporations had not discovered it, he had discovered it. And I've got pictures of it on my, let's see, in some of the videos I do on the flying saucer projects on my website. I'm just trying to remember where they are. Anyway, I've showed pictures of the model, ones that we had made here as well, and briefly explained the circuit to folks. I didn't particularly want to give all the details to our enemies, but enough to let people know that with a little bit of thought, they could make it work and move, heavy objects around in addition to making a flying saucer. And that was, as I say, in the late 50s, early 60s, and they went by leaps and bounds after that. And there were joint ventures with these transdimensional beings, and there were a number of different types of, genetic models of entities. I mean, tall, somewhat reptilian DNA in their skin so that it made like an oil slick on their hands when they were in the sun. And I've heard but not seen, of course, the gray ones and the tall and short ones. I think those are just biological robots, but yeah, I've not been given any access to information to say that there were like 12 foreign or alien races. I don't know how many there are, and I don't know how far it reaches out, but yeah.
Did you ever interact with any of them in Australia or?
Well, good question. And not when I was with the project, but after I left the project, I was over in Perth and I was called by a man and woman that lived down the hill from where I was. I didn't know them. They just called me and come down to see them at their house. And they were attached to the United Nations. And I walked down into their house in broad daylight. And as I walked in, I felt the weirdest sensation, like I was a canary in a cage and they were the cat and they'd open the door. I felt threatened. Just no reason that I can say, what I saw. And they wanted to know a lot about what I was doing and what I had done at the project. And I know that we had some like them that were representing their group in the United Nations and various other global organizations. So they could have been. As I say, it's the only time I felt like I was the sensation that I was threatened by them. And so other than that, I never met any that I knew about.
Okay. I have so many questions, Stan. I know we're not going to be able to get to all of it tonight.
Let's take it one at a time.
I have heard that with the pyramids, the materials like that were used to not necessarily just to build them, but on the outside of them were like quartz crystals. And I've heard speculation that perhaps when the craft would land, like you're talking about them landing on the step pyramids, that it was almost like a charging station for the craft. And I don't know if or do the craft would they not need to be charged if they're somehow pulling energy from the atmosphere?
Well, the modern ones anyway, they have a device to actually extract energy from the gravitational field they're in, so they can power themselves with an onboard device. As far as the pyramids, it's like Stargate, the TV series. Why did they build all these pyramids in South America, China, the United States, in the Middle East, in Egypt? What was the purpose of it? And from the Sumerian records about their ziggurats, you have to wonder if that was just a gating mechanism rather than a charge, the UFO thing. Now, in the diaries of the Greek philosopher Herodotus, who actually traveled over to Egypt, at his time, the priests of Sais had on their stela information saying that the Great Pyramid was way before the Great Flood, and that it originally had a moat around it, and that it would produce light at the top of it that would illuminate the whole area. So the pyramid in Greek, pyra, fire, middle, pyramid, fire in the middle of this pyramid. Beyond that, I don't have much more information to contribute to that. I think it was not so much a charging station, but it's a power structure for the locals.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that as well, and that's fascinating. So, if a human is operating the craft, those craft, it's been kind of speculated that there's no way that there could be a human inside of them because of how fast they move and the angles that they make, that if you were inside of it, that you'd be, you'd splatter against it because of how fast it's moving. Can you explain how humans are operating those crafts, what's happening?
Yeah, sure. I laugh when I see this, our scientists, saying that it's impossible. What would flatten them out, a human operating at, if you turn a corner at 20,000 miles an hour, that's equivalent to being on a very, very, very tall building and jumping off and hitting the cement without any protection. Let me draw this analogy. Let's take a 50-story building. Now, if a guy were to jump off of that and land on the cement below, he'd die, right? Okay,
right.
That's like a sudden directional change in a craft. But suppose that you had a super strong titanium sphere that you could put him inside of another sphere, and put a lubricant in between the two spheres. So he's inside of a titanium sphere that's inside of another titanium sphere with fluid and little ball bearings, maybe even. Now we throw that over the side of the 50-story building, and it goes down to the ground, and smack, it doesn't flatten because it's tough. What happens to the guy inside in that other sphere? He starts to spin because he's off balance. He's not central in that sphere, so he would cause the smaller sphere he's in to spin. And how long would it spin? Well, it would spin, probably minutes, passing the energy of its spinning, its friction, out as heat through the fluid and out to the outside of that outer titanium ball. Now, what I'm saying is he's taken 100 to 200 times the time that he would normally spend going to zero when he goes splat, to amortize that energy change over 200 to 300 times the time. In the craft, the saucer craft, they're like that titanium bell, except they're different metals. And it's a field that goes through all the craft and everybody in it. And it's control of that spinning electrogravitational field. The control of that vectors tells you what direction you're going to go, and you charge it up and then spin. Well, if inside that field your atoms are now spun up so you can make that turn, for you could sit there and drink a cup of coffee and play a game of cards while you're turning a corner at 20,000 miles an hour. For you, it would take, many, many minutes to get around that turn and go in another direction. On the ground, they would see it instantaneously go bing, bing, and then right angle to, another direction. But inside the craft, the inertial change from gravity, the stresses of, inertia, would be amortized over several hundred times the amount that you see when you see them from the ground. And so you'd have all that time, say at 1G force inside the craft, to weather the turn. And you'll notice that the majority of these craft that have been reported over the years, they travel in zigzag motions. They don't go gradually around a corner. They'll go stop, new direction, like that, up. it's always kind of right angle turns or stop, go, straight lines. And that's why. It's because they have to spin it up. And once they've made the turn, blow the extra energy out of the field and, keep on going. The light goes out. People have reported seeing these things come zipping along here in front of them and then stop, brilliant flash, and then go a new direction. Brilliant flash is the energy discharge after they made the turn. It's all relative time. And so that's why it doesn't kill humans, is because the time spent going around that corner for them is amortized over many hundreds of times.
I'd like to hear from you about how these craft and these entities, how it relates to what's going on as far as your estimation of what's unfolding, maybe as it relates to end times prophecy. What are we going to have to look forward to, or what are we going to be seeing here in the near future?
Well, Chris, if it weren't for biblical prophecy, like everyone else that's a scientist or, interested person, I would think, wow, here comes this super race of beings from all these other planets or whatever. They're going to help us pull our technology up to the top to their level and, extend life periods, and life would be wonderful. But with biblical prophecy, Jesus himself said, do not be deceived. There's a great deception coming. And if the leader of this group says to you, come out to this secret place in the desert or somewhere else in a secret place and meet with me there, know that these are imposters and are not from my kingdom, which is the parallel universe, the heavens. And, that warning is very strong, stern, and it says, don't be tricked. Now, I looked at that and I thought, what the heck is he talking about? And years ago, when I got inducted in this program, I suddenly realized this is the great deception. We are surrounded here on this planet by fallen ones in a war that occurred in the heavens and is still occurring between Satan, who rebelled against God, and he and his minions are down here preparing a battleground and technology, which we were helping him build, to fight against Jesus and his army when they come to clean the planet of all the evil things that are here, people like Satan and his minions and various poisons and toxins, to clean up the planet. Well, that has to be done after Satan and his minions and his people all over the planet have been locked up for a judgment 1,000 years from now, roughly 1,000 years. Now, to do that, they have to convince the people of Earth that aliens from other races can be friendly. Now, you'll notice that we've had aliens that came and gave signs to Emperor Constantine and various other people through the ages. Aliens that have come recently and bled the blood out of animals, and cut tongues and eyes and genitals out and really hurt people, and then captured women and impregnated them. Very evil type entities. So we've got what is happening is that the scenario that Jesus warned us about, Satan is trying to make a fake version that we have bad guys and good guys from the heavens. So little grays, tall grays, insectoids, whatever. These things are the bad guys. Now, there will be people that look like us, beings that look like humans, and, not ugly things. And they will come posing as messengers of light and peace. We mean you no harm. We will get rid of all of those bad, entities that are here. They shouldn't have been on the planet. They know the rules. We'll get rid of them. And also, we'll get rid of all of your leadership on the planet, the so-called Illuminati that have, set on you, and oppressed you for generations. We'll get rid of them, and we'll get you to choose a world leader, and we will back him with technology and support so that you can have a peaceful planet, a whole planet under one law and, one financial system and whatever else. And so people will be fooled by this. If the option is death, I mean, they'll certainly accept this new world order if it comes, bearing gifts and whatever. Bible says that'll happen for maybe 3.5 years before the leader of this new world order starts to expose himself as a really bad dude and cause death and maim and especially people who are becoming Christians during that time, he will have them beheaded. So this is why it is important for me and those like me to come and tell you, do not be deceived by these aliens that come and say, we're here in this secret place or that place, come to us here and join us. Because when the real Messiah comes, there will be like a flash of lightning from heaven, from the horizon to horizon. Everyone, every living thing will know that he has arrived. There won't be a secret. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to warn people about the great deceptions. Do not be deceived. And it took people like me that have been involved in this project to come out and say, look, yeah, it's real. And, aliens or, beings that live off a planet, they're real. But here's the game. And don't be fooled by this first arrival that are going to fool us. And when I would give lectures on this 30 years ago, 40 years ago, I would use the movie V. And it was a made-for-television movie in the middle 70s, about 77, 78. And I used that to show that, excuse me, that people of Earth were fooled by these beings coming looking like friendly humans. And they would land and make peace with the humans, and in return for taking seawater that they needed on their planet, they would give us all kinds of technology to cure cancer and anti-gravity and all that kind of stuff. Now, in the movie, you see that these apparently human beings, when you pull their outer skin off, they're really reptilian lizards. Like Satan is supposed to be a reptile or a snake in the garden or whatever. So they were deceiving humans, but looking like they were friendly. So I used that whole movie had things in it from the book of Revelation that people wouldn't realize unless they started to study the prophecies of the Christian Bible. But it was made there for us to be able to use as a blueprint, as a video teaching aid to say, look, there's something like this about to happen, but don't be fooled. So yeah, I suppose that's why myself and the guy over in Oxford that was doing this and a few other places that we've been given this knowledge was to help prove to people that you're going to be deceived, so don't be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, we've been aware of that here, at Camp Hermon. So we kind of talk about that kind of coming deception and want to do our part too to kind of help to educate people about that so that they're not deceived if that does indeed happen. So I'd like to shift gears here and kind of let you talk about some of the recent things that you've been researching.
Well, I got sent a link to a video here about 2 weeks ago where a Christian fellow was saying, look at Revelation 12, where it talks about the woman and having the sun, at her head, and the moon at her feet, and the dragon being at her feet to devour her man-child when she delivers, and the 12 stars, in her crown. And I thought, right, okay, this is an interesting video because he's trying to relate this to things in the heavens, constellations in the heavens as a way to tell a story. And then I remembered, I read a book many years ago, the Message in the Stars, and I forget the guy's name now. I lost my book years ago, but basically the scholar said, if you look at the names of the stars in various constellations, those stars are named with derivative meanings that relate to the whole constellation. And I had thought at the time, wait a minute, if I sit here and look up at the stars, do I see a dragon or, a lion or bird? I don't see that. Somebody had to put that map up there in my mind. I had to draw a map and choose stars and name stars that would tell you what's happening at that period of time. So I thought, right, did some research into the synagogues that formed after Rome took over Israel. And the synagogues, most of them had a very nice mosaic of the zodiac, of the 12 signs of the zodiac, star patterns on the floor of their synagogues. And, you look at what uh, John said out of Patmos when he wrote the book of Revelation, he was using some references to star patterns, which will not change. Names will be the same, places will be the same, to tell you a secret message, because he had to give you information that Satan would also read, but perhaps would not worry about, because most people wouldn't understand the secret message for, Jewish and Christian followers. And I looked, I used that program Stellarium, and I put the date in to see when the moon would be at the head of the Virgo, the woman, which would be Israel, and when the moon would be at her feet at the same time, and where there would be a crown of 12 stars, which is the Leo formation above it, which is always going to be there. And all these clues that came from the Revelation passage. Let me just see if I can read that to you here. Okay, Revelation 12:3. Okay, and another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. Well, when I look at star formations to try to see what they were talking about, I found that there's a dragon formation, and then there's a serpent formation. And the dragon, which could be the serpent as well, let's see, it could either be a winged dragon in the formation Draco, which is slightly off-centered to the feet of the woman. It says that he was there in Revelation 12. He stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. Well, we think that was because she was Israel bringing the Messiah, Jesus, giving birth to him, and Satan wanted to kill him, the dragon. But there were two translations of dragon versus serpent. Now, there is a serpent formation at the feet of the woman, serpens, which is normally attributed to a medical type sign, where you have the caduceus, where you have the like a sword or a cross with twin snakes going down it, whatever. But I saw that this was closer to her feet, than the dragon formation, which is 1 or 2 constellations away. Couldn't resolve that, but I did find that this formation they're talking about, moon at her feet and the sun at her head, clothing her, and various other planetary situations there, that in 2016 it occurred, and now it's occurring right now. We have been in it for about a week now. Now, if that's meant to tell us in the revelation of John there that the man-child being delivered, are we in the man-child? Are we in Christ? Are we being delivered? Is that going to be a rapture date? I don't know. It's created more questions in my mind than answers, but I find it fascinating that these star maps have been put up there for way before, civilization. In the Arabic tongue, and in Greek, in English, in Egyptian, these things were handed down to them. And a lot of the star names are Arabic. So somebody had to have a star map that showed these 12 signs, what would be happening in the periods of man. Because if you look at the woman Virgo, right above her is the constellation Leo, and that they say that the way you read the zodiac is you go, the woman gives birth to the Messiah, go through ages until the return of the Messiah as the ruling king, Leo. So you have the start and the end. Virgo and Leo is where it all ends, and where it began, where it ends. So yeah, that's what I've spent a little bit of time going through Stellarium, looking at that and trying to figure out, going back and retranslating some of the Greek, with the accordance computer thing, and various Greek lexicons and whatever, and Hebrew lexicons for the Old Testament, trying to see exactly what that word for dragon meant, and if they use the right one. And I'm trying to relate, basically, in Revelation 12, those things to signs in the heavens, because the lights in the heavens were put there for signs for us as well. It tells you that in the Bible. So what is the sign? Well, when Daniel was in captivity in Babylon, he was a Chaldean, which means he was the upper class scientist, rich class of Babylon. He was a Chaldean. And we think that it was some of his mates that were astronomers that were the three wise men that watched the star formation, watched the star movement, which was probably a planet, said, right, that will be over where Jesus will be born, where the Messiah will be born. That's why they traveled to Israel to give him gifts, because the Messiah would be born there. When you look at these things, these signs are put there for a good reason. And Daniel's people, his friends and stuff that were in that group of scientists and astronomers, they followed these things. They knew how to interpret them. So anyway, I go on and on about this because there's a lot of different things that we can learn from this.
Oh, it is. It really is fascinating that there's a story playing out in the heavens, like you're saying, in the stars.
Yeah. And let me just check something here. Let's call that Revelation 13, I think it is. While I was poking around in there, I've done this before. I looked at Revelation 13, and it goes on about the Antichrist and then the false prophet. And let's see here. Okay. Fire come down. Okay. The 666 stuff that people worry about. In Revelation 13 is another code. The Bible prophecy in the Revelation of John refers to other books and writings in the Torah and the Old Testament to help you decipher what he's saying. But you have to know where it is in the Old Testament to go look for it to see what he was saying. Now, second beast says, I'm looking for the mark here. Now, Revelation 13:18. This calls for wisdom about the numbering of the beast. Let the one who has understanding, who's clever, calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now, the first part of that, this calls for wisdom. Now, it's not straightforward like you would see what it says. Where in the Bible, in the entire Bible, is anything mentioning 666? Well, you go back, it's King Solomon. Who was the wisest person in the Old Testament? King Solomon. What did he receive in tribute from all of his, tributing nations and all the investments he had all over the world? Every year he receives 666 talents of gold. That's a lot. Now, that's the number of the beast, the number of a man. Now, the number of a man, okay, here wisdom is. Who was that man in the Old Testament? It was Solomon. I thought, okay, maybe the modern Solomon will be, or the modern Antichrist, or the beast, or the false prophet, the second beast. Maybe he will be a rich fellow. Maybe he will be like a Solomon, or hey, maybe even his name is like Solomon, and that will help us to identify him. So I thought, right, let's look in the world for people named Solomon. Well, let's look up the name Solomon. In the Bible, King Solomon was not called King Solomon. In Hebrew, his name was Melech Shlomo. King Solomon was Shlomo. Okay, Shlomo. That's not Solomon. But in all the Arab nations around there, they worshipped a character, a king in their legends named Solomon, King Solomon, Salman. And he had a device that would put fire out ahead of his armies to destroy his enemies' armies, like the Ark of the Covenant did. In fact, a lot of the things that are attributed to the Israeli King Solomon were attributed to the same Ben Salman, Salmaneser in the Bible. In the Middle East, I thought, all right, we're looking for a rich person, for a name that's like Solomon. and you know that he's probably not going to be Jewish or Christian. He's going to be his own thing. There's one guy that has leaped out of the pages of history at me right now. A young prince in Saudi Arabia. His father is still alive, so he is a prince. And as Daniel said, he will sign the covenant between Israel and the many nations around it, but he will be the prince of the covenant. And his name is Mohammed bin Salman, and that is the form of Solomon in the Middle East. He is wealthy beyond all imaginings, and he is setting up a group of Arabic nations. And I'm going to interject something here, which Christian people will get all excited about. I'm sure that's not allowed. But Nostradamus, regardless of the way he got his information, said that the Antichrist, the third Antichrist, the one of this age, will be called Mabus. And you know that Nostradamus left information that the church could not translate, because they weren't thinking like he was. Mabus. Prince bin Salman, Mohammed bin Salman, is called openly MBS. He has formed an Arabic Union, AU, MABUS. MBS is Arabic Union. We have to watch him. And in fact, this interview that he did on Fox Nation over the last week, I nearly fell out of my chair with the things he was saying, because he is definitely going toward world leadership. He owns banking systems, blockchain, all that kind of stuff to control a global economy of the world. He is now pressuring the United States into losing the U.S. dollar as the medium exchange and the petrodollar, all that kind of stuff. He is controlling the United States to the point of collapsing its economy, so it will be forced its people to go into the world economy, which will be a numbering system. He already has money invested in that system. It's well, and
Wow.
it all fits together. Anyway, as I say, you have to look at the coding in the Bible to help you decode itself. It's there, not a mystery. And Mohammed bin Salman is about to sign a peace treaty with Israel and Iran and the many Arab nations in his Arab Union. He is on the verge of doing it. That's what they were talking about on the interview on Fox. He is within weeks, maybe days, of signing that thing and making a deal with the Palestinians to allow it to happen. So when I see that, I realize that's probably the second beast, or the false prophet. I wonder who is before him then. Did I misinterpret what Revelation 13 said about, the Antichrist and then the false prophet that comes after him, a second beast? So, but MBS looks like the second beast because he causes all these things to happen. So I don't know who the first beast would be, unless it's a man that is appointed by the aliens that are coming for the deception. Anyway, these are things that keep me occupied when I'm sitting out there drinking a cup of coffee in the morning.
No, it's all very fascinating. And Stan, I have to admit, I go back and forth between a partial preterist view and kind of a futurist view when it comes to my eschatology or end times beliefs. So yeah, I haven't nailed that down personally. I
Chris,
flip flop.
Okay.
I flip flop back and forth.
Hey, we're discussing. It's not something you got to think this. Nobody died and left me in charge. This is just where I am today.
Yeah. No, I mean it's all fascinating, and for me, I kind of have a let's wait, like we'll see kind of approach. When it comes to things that are happening. And my issue is I see great points on kind of both sides of that argument, whether it's kind of partial preterist and a lot of the things in Revelation happened already, or futurist view, like we're waiting for these things to happen. And it seems like they're going to happen soon within that kind of futurist view. So my question is always, like, what do we do with this information as believers? I love actionable information. Like, what's the takeaway from this? Is there any way that we can best be prepared from a practical standpoint? I mean, I think definitely we should always, as Christians, as believers, we should always be missionally minded in doing our part in the Great Commission, right? Go therefore and make disciples. So yeah, what's the actionable information here? Is there anything we can do to prepare?
Sure. Let's say that, my preterist view is wrong and that we're going to be here through the tribulation period, or at least halfway through it or whatever, maybe all of it. What would you do to live in a world where you have to be given a number and you have to swear allegiance to the New World Order leader? How would you do that if you're told not to receive the mark on your hand or your forehead, but you can't buy or sell without it? As a Christian, what would you do? You'd have to go bush. You'd have to leave the cities, wouldn't you? You'd have to be prepared with whatever you need in that time. Can you hide your preparation? I mean, how much preparation can you have for a year, year and a half? Can you haul it in your trailer? Oh, I can't buy gasoline. I have to store all the gasoline I'll need for that, or the diesel or whatever. When you look at it practically, there's no way that we can avoid taking the number unless we are prepared to be homeless on the street and out, without a number. They're going to force that on us to live. So you prepare as best you can to survive, in the forest, the woods, or whatever. But understand that the tracking systems we've got today from orbit, beautiful systems. But anyway, that they are going to nail you. Right. You can't hide. And you need food and water. And so they already know that we're going to go to places, if we're here, where we can't be easily detected. And they're not going to worry about the fringe that gets out into Grand Canyon or whatever it is, some national park, and hides for a while. They're more concerned with organizing the major population centers into this world government, to worship Satan, who's going to be, his man's going to be the Antichrist. So they will eventually come around, get us. Once they've stabilized the planet under their rule, their dictatorship, they will start going out and collecting us, sending people out, troops or whatever, to get us, if we have, survived to that point. Now, when Paul talked to the Thessalonians, he said, they asked him, when Paul was in their village, he said, you have questions for me? And they said, yeah. Has the man of sin already come? Has he been revealed? Is he Caesar in Rome? I mean, have we been left behind? Are we going to have to, rough it like this? And he says, let me ask you a question, he says. Has the man of sin been revealed yet? Do you know who it is? No. Then you haven't been left behind. So what does that tell us? When the man of sin is revealed, we're not going to be here to be saying, I've been left behind. We will either have been taken away, or I've misinterpreted that verse there. And I've had dream visions, which, many which have come true already, but I've been led to understand that this is going to be a pre-tribulation rapture. That's just me. But I can see the logic, because we can't survive. The good news is he's going to come and get us. He's going to retrieve the bride. Now, that whole thing goes back to the Old Testament, which has, it's not been altered so much by the Catholic Church or other churches. New Testament could have been altered and that kind of stuff. But when you go back to Abraham and, sending out men to get his bride in a foreign land, Abraham sending men to get his son Isaac's bride in a foreign land, that's like a parallel for God sending his son to collect the bride and bring her back to him. This will happen. During the tribulation period, there will be people who suddenly realize this was true, that God is real. I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to take the number. And they will be executed, those that are caught. some will probably live through it to the end of the 7-year tribulation, but it will be a difficult trot, a difficult time. Look, I've tried to have other views and see how they fit, but knowing that we cannot live in what is coming without taking the number, we're either just going to die and there'll be no rapture, or we're going to have a rapture, and it's going to come at a time when we haven't been compromised. I mean, I debated with a man from the Theosophical Society from Findhorn who was down in Australia talking to an audience of his people. And we discussed the matter of a lot of people disappearing off of the earth. He says, oh, yeah, we realize there's going to be that event. I said, do you? He said, yeah. It's the people whose vibrations aren't of the new world order, and they're going to be taken to other planets and levels of existence to be trained and polished like fine gems to come back and live here in peace and love and harmony with us. And I said, that's funny. We say that the rapture, the liftoff of these people it's going to be taking the people who are believing in the true King, the true Messiah, the true God, and are being taken up to prepare an army to come back and fight Satan and his minions here. And he and I were standing across from each other, across an audience, and close enough that I could see his face. And I looked at him and I just nodded and pointed my finger, and he nodded back. And so we knew we were on opposite sides of the fence preparing people for what is coming. So they're expecting a rapture.
Right.
When I saw that, I was just like, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And look, if I'm wrong, I'm not getting out of here any sooner than the rest of you. But I have, and Holly has done this mostly. We have told people how to prepare, how to live, hand to mouth in the bush and whatever, if you can find a place that you're not going to be picked off, too soon.
Well, you talk about how easy it is to find somebody nowadays. And it made me think of a story that a buddy of mine told me. He's in the Army, and he's not special forces, but he's special forces adjacent. And he was saying that the Delta Force operators were testing some AI system for tracking people. And so they got some of their guys to go dark, to get off grid, and they wanted to see how long it would take them to find them. And I forget what their lead time was. I think it was at least a few days. It may have been a week or 5 days or something. And he said that whatever system they were using, artificial intelligence based, it found them in like less than 20 minutes. And these are guys that are trained to disappear and be off grid.
Yeah, but this AI, I don't know how much access it had, but when you look at a quantum computer like we've got in Utah on the border there, a quantum computer, and there are 3 of them on the planet. There's one in the Netherlands somewhere, or in the Icelandic nation states. Let me just think which one it was. Anyway, they all have these supercomputers that are so superbly fast and so big in memory, and they have access to satellites. And if they have access to all the satellites even, and to road travel, air travel, people buying stuff, all known associates of you, where they are, where you might go. This AI is just like a genie in a bottle. It can say, like I know for a fact at Texas Instruments, because I was sent the documents about 12, 15 years ago. They have a device they've made to put over roadways, over major highways. And it just looks like a little spike. It's a camera detection system, but not a camera so much as it is a electromagnetic sensor. It can track 4 lanes of traffic, all having cars or trucks on them traveling at up to 100 miles an hour. And it can tell you how many people are in each vehicle, the number of the neighbor or the license plate, photographs sometimes, but always being able to even read things like photo IDs, which have a barcode that is something they can determine electromagnetically what it is. They can read that at 100 miles an hour, 4 lanes of traffic. Now, that was 15 years ago. And if you put an AI in charge of that stuff, I mean, it's like the Colossus, the Forbin project, where they had a supercomputer there. I don't know whether you're old enough to have seen that, but it showed what happens. It becomes a massive monster. It just knows everything. It embeds itself into phones, now iPhones and stuff like that. And it puts copies of itself everywhere to send information back to itself. It becomes what's called a heuristic system. It knows that it needs information and goes out to find it to reprogram itself. And that's spooky because value judgments of the programmers, not a programmer that wrote the system for the AI, there are value decisions that will conflict at some point in time. And the AI will say, well, this programmer said to do this, and that one said to do the opposite. What do I do? Make a choice. And so it's unstable. It's going to make choices that are sometimes illogical because its programmers are multitude. It's when you have so many viewpoints and biases programming the resources for this AI, you can't help but have a problem with that. It's not really a God-centered intelligence. It's a fast machine drawing on the resources put into it by various programmers. Excuse me. So yeah, I believe that they can find them in jack quick time. And the thing is, unless you're really important to the world order at that point, if you're hiding, but they're going to get to you eventually, they may know where you are and track you through your associates and people you contact or whatever, and by your heat pattern, all kinds of stuff they can track you by. But they'll just put you on the to-do list, round to it list, and they'll get to you, but they know where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. I say it's scary, but for me, and I think as believers, our hope and our trust and our faith is in the Lord. And my wife, when I talk to my wife about, when we talk about end time stuff, her perspective is, I just want to make sure my lamp is full.
Oh, well. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's like, I just want to make sure my lamp is full and that I'm ready no matter what happens. And so I think it's important to have that perspective that no matter what's going to happen, be it a day from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, 100 years from now, day to day, that we are ready to meet the Lord.
Yeah.
That our hearts are right, that our minds are right. That we're loving God and that we're loving our neighbor. That's what's important.
Now, the oil in the lamps of the wise virgins, the oil is the Holy Spirit, to be filled with the Spirit and be in touch with the Lord. I've often thought about that parable. The 5 foolish virgins who ran out of oil, did they lose their faith? What was it? What do you think?
And that goes to the question of, once saved, always saved, yeah. And that's something I've gone back and forth on too. And I've kind of landed here, and I don't know if I have solid Bible for it. I'm just speaking generally, just thinking about it. I used to think, okay, once saved, always saved, because I didn't do anything to earn my salvation. So how can it be taken away? But that's not 100% true, depending on how you think of it. I didn't do anything to earn my salvation, yes, but what I did do is I did swear allegiance to the Lord Jesus Christ. So I think if you can swear allegiance to him, then you can choose to deny him. Right? Like you can choose to accept the gift. If you can reject it before you accept it, then you can reject it after you've accepted it, I think. So I think it's certainly possible for those virgins that, maybe they let the cares of this world or the enticements of this world drain them, so to speak, and they chose the world over the Lord, perhaps.
Yeah, they backslid, if you wish.
Yeah, yeah.
Every day, you got to say to the Lord, please find me worthy, to be delivered from this place of evil. I'm on your side, and I sinned today that I know of, such and such. I repent of that. I won't do that anymore, and try to keep yourself in good standing with Him.
And I don't think when it comes to sin, I don't think it's an issue of losing your salvation. I tend to agree with Dr. Michael Heiser, who's gone to be with the Lord, but I tend to agree with him on a lot, not everything, but a lot. And he talked a lot about, it's about believing loyalty. So I think as long as you don't deny the Lord, like once you've accepted Him, you've confessed with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead and you shall be saved, that you're a new creation in Christ Jesus. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. As long as you don't turn away and deny Him, because the word says, if you deny me before men, I'll deny you before my Father. So I think as long as you maintain that believing loyalty, from a salvation standpoint, I think you're good. You're in, right? As long as you don't turn your back on Him and you deny Him. But definitely when it comes to the quality of our relationship, yeah, every single day we need to ask the Lord to renew our heart, to renew our mind, search our own heart and our own mind for where there's sin, so that we can ask God to cleanse us of all of that unrighteousness, not because we're worried about our salvation, but because our closeness with God and our relationship with Him is important.
There are a number of gatherings of Christians. There's the bride, which is a special category. And during the tribulation period, there are those that are brought up out of the great tribulation as believers, but they aren't the bride. They are a separate category. So when we talk about the rapture and being found worthy to be caught up in the rapture of the bride, that's a special place. There are going to be people raptured. I mean, there have been raptures of individuals, in the past, that were caught up to be with the Lord. What was it? Wasn't Elijah? Was it Elijah? Individuals have been caught up. Moses has been caught up to come back down, probably one of the two witnesses during the tribulation period. So there are raptures, per se, of individuals and groups in several categories. I think what we're talking about here, the first thing is the rapture of the bride, which is a special group. Being found worthy to be in that is great honor, but great peace. And so this good news, the gospel, it tells you good news and how not to worry and what's going to happen. So, it's up to each of us to try to figure it out. And you and I are both talking with the Lord every day, and we encourage people to do that. The Holy Spirit was left in us, put in us by Messiah when He left, so that we have a comforter to use while He is absent. Remember that He's on a different time frame in the heavens than we are down here. So the comforter was left on our time frame as a power for us to use. There's just so many things, Chris, that kind of come up when you think about these things while you're out there having your cup of coffee, Wow.
You mentioned coffee, and we have partnered with a company called Kevlar Joe. It's a small artisan company. Air Force veteran, actually, Nick Fisher is the owner, right, and the craftsman, so to speak. He's an Air Force veteran as well. And I'll have to send you some coffee if you're a coffee man. All
right.
We have a few blends with Kevlar Joe. We've got our Bigfoot blend, Dog Man's Delight blend.
Let me ask you this: are they already ground up, or do I have to get a grinder?
He's got whole bean as well as ground.
Well, ground would be my
Yeah.
spot in life.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send you a couple of bags and see what you like. And
Will
for
I see
anybody
visions?
listening,
Will I see visions when I drink this coffee, or what?
you might. It might be that good.
Uh,
I don't know.
yeah, I'm just teasing.
No, I know.
Uh,
So for anybody listening, if you want to check out his coffee, go to kevlarjoe.com. And if you use the promo code Campermon10, you get 10% off. Supports Nick. I mean, him and his wife, they are saints. They're foster parents. They have a few kids of their own, and they've also started fostering kids, and they've got a newborn right now that they're taking care of. And they're amazing.
all right.
Can't say enough good things about them.
Excellent.
But yeah, well, if you message me or email me a mailing address, I'll
Okay.
get you some coffee sent over for you to try.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Stan, I really appreciate your time.
I was thought of something I was going to tell you there. Just a second. Don't run off here. Yeah. Oh, did you know that in addition to the people we know about, like Moses, Elijah and stuff like that, that there are beings, and I don't know how many, on the earth who are called Shoshbin, and they are friends of the Messiah to watch over his bride and to prepare her for his arrival. But they are called Shoshbin. Interesting, hey?
Where does that information come out of?
In Hebrew, use the English Hebrew translator if you wish, but look up SHO, Shosh, SH, Ben. I think it's BIN. It could be BEN. And you'll see what that person's job is. And in the Jewish literature, the Shoshbin is a friend of the bride. He's the one that takes care of the bride until the Messiah or the groom gets to her to tell her when he's coming, to announce his coming. And so, in essence, a lot of the watchmen on the wall are Shoshbin. We don't know who.
Would they be sons of God, B'nai Ha-Elohim?
Don't know.
Do you think? Okay.
Well, let me tell you this. I had a dream vision here probably last year. I'd never heard of them either. And in the dream vision, I was walking down a Cardo at the old market street in Jerusalem, in Old Jerusalem. And I stopped at one place to buy a round blue ball, a gemstone. It was very valuable. And then as I walked down toward the Cardo, it ended in a door that opened up into like a nice wooden frame home, a very nice home. But and as I started to go in, there was a vendor there that sold me a piece of old, was it parchment, or was it like could have been carved into a stone, and just had two Hebrew letters in it. And I took that, I bought it, and I went into the house. And now the house was a happy place. It was getting ready for a marriage. And in front of me, there was a window of sunshine coming in, and standing next to the window was the bride that was going to be married. Beautiful, happy. Tables were spread out, getting, ready for the party and stuff, with food on it and everything. And I walked over to her. She knew me for some reason. And I said, I have your gift here. And I gave her the round blue gemstone ball, which was the earth. And she took it and said, thank you. And I looked at that antique thing that they'd sold me on that stone, or that papyrus, or whatever it was. And I looked up the two letters, which led me to Shoshbin and the understanding of what a Shoshbin does. And it was like I was helping the bride to tell her he's coming. I don't know. And that's, it was the first time I started looking into that kind of stuff. And
yeah.
the fact that I've had the out of body experience, nearly died, and was shown a lot of things on the other side, makes me think that I better pay attention to these things.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. And it's comforting to think that the Shoshbin, that they're around,
Yeah,
or that that the Lord is watching over us, that we have friends, that we have um, the Watchers, right? Sons of B'nai Elohim, sons of God, that or angels, messengers, that bring prosperity, healing, protection, and we don't see them. It's kind of like the whole. I think Billy Graham used this analogy for the Holy Spirit, but we could use it for the Shoshbin, or angels, for lack of a better term. They're like the wind. We don't see them, although some people do. Seers see them, but for the rest of us, we don't see them like the wind. You don't see the wind, but we see the effects of the wind.
sure, sure.
If we're paying attention, and we're aware, and we're in tune with the Holy Spirit, you can see and feel the effects of them in our lives.
Yeah. I was wounded once in a hunting accident, and uh, when I was in the hospital in the evening, it was a one-story building in Mesquite, Texas. I saw my angel. She was probably 5.5 feet tall, something like that, strawberry blondish hair, young. And she appeared at the door in the hospital after visiting hours. I just thought she was a nurse. She said, "Turn over. I'm going to put a salve on your back, a cream on your back that will ease the pain in your leg where the bullet is." So I did, turned over, and she started rubbing that on my back, and it instantly felt warm. And I said, "Boy, you can do that for the next 100 years. That feels great. The pain is gone." And I turned around because she didn't answer, and I turned around like this, which was difficult with the pain in the leg at the time. And I looked, and the tube of stuff was gone. She was gone. And I thought, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Next morning, I called in, the doctor came in for his 8 o'clock rounds. He's a friend of mine, Dr. Perung. And he said, "Well, how are you doing today?" Because we were thinking we might have to take the leg because of the damage. It was 18 inches of bullet hole.
Wow.
And he said, "Good Lord." He said, "What did you do?" And I said, "What?" He said, "We're not going to have to take the leg. It's healing up." I said, "Well, is that nurse you sent in with that back rub and stuff, that is great." He said, "What nurse?" I said, "Oh, come on." I said, "What was it? 8:30, 9 o'clock?" And she came down the hallway. It's a single-story hospital, one hallway, one nurse at the other end watching. He went out and got that nurse. He brought her in. The watching nurse, the whatever you call her, matron or whatever. And he said, "Did you have anybody come in here last night?" "Well, no." "You don't have a nurse that matches his?" "Well, no." So I'm sure I saw an angel.
Yeah. Wow.
So
That's amazing.
it helps to solidify my faith.
Yeah.
And I can only share that and the out of body experience and stuff like that with people, but it's not the same as them having themselves. So I have to do a lot of hand waving and talking to try to tell them, look, this is real.
Right. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, so many people, there's so many stories that I can just generally think of that I've heard over the course of my life, of people that have had similar experiences, whether it was, being in a car accident, and, someone pulling them out of the car, and witnesses saying like nobody saw anybody else, or,
Yeah.
just there's so many stories like that. And I think, the blessing in those stories is the comfort of knowing that the Lord, that Jesus, he loves us so much that that he sends us helpers,
Oh,
that
yeah.
we are being watched over, and we are being protected. And even in even in the tough times in life when things aren't going the way that we think they should, or we're experiencing, trials and tribulations, so to speak, I think we can take solace in knowing that God is good, and that, we don't go through anything for no reason. And, I remember when my mom passed away years ago from complications of cervical cancer. And I remember when I was in school, I've got my bachelor's degree in Bible. And when I was in school, talking to my mom through a pretty painful and tough period. And I must have been, I was in Old Testament, and, looking at the story of, those three fellas, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and everyone who's familiar with their Old Testament kind of remembers that story. It's, bow down and worship or be thrown into the fiery furnace. And these guys are like, our God is able to save us, to deliver us. But even if he doesn't, we are still not going to bow down. And that really struck me at that time, because my mom at that time was going to a church that a little bit word of faith and prosperity gospel, not full on, but a little bit. And I remember the idea there was like that if you have enough faith, then God will heal you. But if you're not healed, then maybe you didn't have enough faith or this or that. And I just remember talking to my mom saying, like, God can heal you. He is able, he is loving. But even if he doesn't, he's still worthy. He's still loving. He's still caring.
Chris, I learned something this year. I've had a bout with prostate cancer, stage 4, now fixed. But in the process of going through that, I saw that when we pray for healing, like the disciples, the apostles are given this power to use the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. It's the local representative of God, the local power. Through Ruach HaKodesh, you pray and command cancer cells, be gone. Blood clots, be gone. That we pray that way, and that was part of the secret teaching that Michael Heiser would tell you about in the Nag Hammadi scrolls, that it is through that device that he left for us to comfort us, that we pray. Certainly he hears our prayers eventually up there. It's the time dilation difference, but his real-time representative is the Holy Spirit. And through that, we pray and command things to take place. And you can move your mountains that way. You can heal bodies that way. So I'm just sharing that with you. I mean, in my own life, I've seen that. So, excuse me.
Yeah. No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I've seen miraculous healings, been a part of them. I just know that there are people who pray for healing even in that way, and it doesn't happen. And so how do I deal with that? How do we deal with that? And I think it's all things are according to his will, ultimately. But B, again, I think it's important to have the perspective that if certain things don't happen the way we think they should or the way we want them to, that we not be resentful of God, or bitter toward him. I don't know, just we're not going to understand everything. Yeah, well, exactly.
Right. There's a bigger picture, and like maybe you don't need to be here, tomorrow, or you don't need to be walking straight, without a cane or something, because that will cause another event to happen that the Lord is going to save another soul with. I mean, you don't know. So you pray if it pleases you, if it fits in with your plan, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And so that's the way I approach it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, me as well.
Yeah.
Well, Stan, this has been a really fun and fascinating conversation, and I would love to have you back on again in the future, if you'd be willing
Sure.
to join us.
You might jot a few notes down to yourself in the meantime and say, I forgot to ask, you know, old Uncle Stan this question, and we'll talk about it in the next show or something.
Well, I'm certain we could spend 100 hours talking, and I will leave away with more questions to ask. But yeah, I'll jot down some notes, and hopefully next time you join us, my co-host Tori and our he'll be our third co-host, Mike Stibbs. I call him Mikey Stibbs. Will be able to join us as well, and we'll have a great roundtable interview and discussion with the whole crew.
Sure.
That'll be a lot of fun.
Do you have any Jewish blood in your lineage?
Not that I know of.
All right. Just curious. Why did you call this the Camp Hermon thing?
That's a great question. So basically, we have set up camp at the base of Mount Hermon, and kind of for two reasons. Not to glorify the fallen ones, the rebels that rebelled, that read about in first book of Enoch. We talk about that because that was kind of a starting point for a lot of shenanigans, right? But also that being the place where Jesus said, upon this rock I shall build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it.
Where he was leaving, when he was
where
leaving.
We're camped out. Yes, okay. Exactly. And where he transfigured.
Yeah.
And kind of the work of Dr. Michael Heiser and others really opened up my eyes and a lot of other people's eyes to just the richness and depth of what Jesus did in his ministry on this earth, where if you grow up in church, you don't really get that. You talk about it, but not from that deep of a perspective, or not from that divine counsel worldview kind of perspective, which in my mind just gives it just makes it brighter. It just really enriches it when you understand it from that perspective, that he went to the places he went to for very specific reasons and for very specific purposes. And that him transfiguring at that spot was kind of like, I don't want to be too crude here, but kind of like a FU to the to the apostate sons of God, to the fallen ones. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just kind of like, or not an FU, but like a, hey guys, like your time has come.
I've noticed that even in the demigod things that the Sumerians worshipped and stuff, they had a high place, like to up on top of something for the portal to easily open up into the parallel dimensions. And I've often wondered about that. Is it something that's a voltage level at the top of that mountain, or why is that what you need to get between the dimensions? But anyway, it's just an idle thought.
Yeah, no, I've wondered that too, honestly, because like I know there's certain high places, like in Colorado. I know there's areas in Colorado where there is just a ton of activity with cults and witchcraft and UFOs and things like that. And it makes me think like, okay, there's something about high places. I have no idea what that is, but it's fascinating. And
yeah, well, just in the valley across the ridge here, the mountains here in Pueblo, the San Juan Valley is full of those New Age kooks. They go there to watch the flying saucers come, and the flying rods and whatever else they do. Holly and I drove over there once and up into the mountains to see, and they've got ashrams and all this kind of weird stuff all over the place. So it's like they've gathered. In fact, when we first came here from Australia in 2001, we were getting our driver's license, and I asked the lady, the policeman, I said, have you noticed any influx of people coming into the... Yeah, she says, we've had a number of people coming to Colorado recently. I said, well, why? She said, well, for religious freedom or something. And I'm thinking, this must be a focal point because good guys and bad guys alike are coming here.
Wow.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Well, Stan, I appreciate you, sir. For anybody that's interested in checking out more of your work and things that you're doing, they can go to Stan Deyo. That's STANDEYO.com. Is there any other place or way that they can connect with you other than through your website that you'd like to point them to?
Well, the Stan Deyo at standeyo.com is my email address. It's pretty easy. But also you can look at or listen to and look at a number of interviews like this with you, but with other people, obviously, on our show images page. No, that's not right. It's on the homepage at standeyo.com, and you look at recent interviews, and Holly's arranged them by years. And you click on that. I don't know whether you're doing it yet or not, but if you go there and look at recent interviews, the microphone there at the top right of the page, and you'll see the recent interviews underneath that. But if you go to recent interviews, the microphone, you have them by year arranged there, and you can get a lot more information that I've talked to all the way back to 2012 or something, or maybe even 2002.
Yeah, they go back.
And you can search online. You can search online for videos and stuff I talk about. Like I have a Patreon channel, Stan and Holly Deyo, I think it is, something like that. But if you go to YouTube and to Rumble and you search for Stan Deyo, videos, you'll see a couple that are really interesting. One is on the Garden of Eden discovery. Another is on Atlantis and how that fit into the flood, and it destroyed the crossbreeding between Adamic man and the fallen ones there. There's a lot of videos, just a lot of videos that you can get online. Just go search for them. So, that in addition to being able to email me, you can look at these things I've talked about and explained for many years now.
Yeah. No, love it. Love your work. Camp on, Stan.
Camp on, Chris.
Until next time.
Shalom.
Of humanity, fallen sons of the Most High God took advantage of the planet He made, forming a holy alliance of evil. And look at the daughters of Adam in vain. Then the flood rain came to restore His creational order to how He arranged. But the disembodied spirits of the giants still want to war, still want to kill in accord. To see the blood of the innocent spill on the floor. That's the demoniac and the kind of Yeshua combined to heal and restore His image bearers in His second chance when He comes.